Well, thanks very much for coming. Despite this being a really scorching hot day, I think, it was quite tempting not to come. But thank you very much for turning up. So what we're trying to do here, we're trying to increase the diversity of our entry-level talent and then successfully enable that talent to thrive. Sorry, Emily, I couldn't wait. But it's not a problem solely confined to planning. It's not even a problem solely confined to advertising. So given the causes of why we have this entry-level talent problem are so multidimensional, they're so complex, why the hell are we planners trying to do something about it? Well, I think for starters, even though we have spent decades arguing about whether we're planners or strategists, regardless of which side of the fence you stand on that particular issue, I think what we can all agree is that we love solving a knotty problem like this, and this is definitely one of them. And we love developing ideas to try and solve them. But I think above all that, in an industry which is ferociously competitive, planners are the ones that tend to actually like collaborating. And I think this is one of those problems that is never going to get solved without collaboration. It's not going to be something where we can go away and go, no, I'm doing my own stuff, thanks. And it's never going to achieve the scale if we try and do stuff in isolation. So sharing our learnings, refining what we do, tweaking as we go along. Also in that spirit, I am so delighted to have so many different agency logos, really nice agency logos behind us. Proof of a collective desire to actually drive industry-wide change. And to have so many people here from even more agencies who've got us to where we are today, offering to do a lot of the volunteering and mentoring behind the 3 initiatives we're going to be talking about today. Thank you all for coming along and being a part of this. And I'm really, really excited to have a great panel with us today. One of the core architects of Arrive and Thrive, fellow APG committee member, Jo Arden, also Chief Strategy Officer of Ogilvy UK, celebrity columnist in Campaign, many other strings to our bow. We have James Hillhouse, who I've never met in person, is surprisingly tall. Co-founder of Commercial Break, an organisation dedicated to increasing the representation of working class people in creative industries such as film and advertising. James has been really helpful with us. He's given up a lot of his time to guide us in the design of our Arrive and Thrive programme. And we're really pleased to have him here today, in particular to share his experience and his knowledge of the retention challenge. And then Steve Lacey, a familiar name to both planners and R&B fans. A brilliant researcher, relentless champion of improving visibility of underrepresented and often marginalised groups, such as the neurodiverse, people with disabilities, and working class communities. And actually, Steve worked with us on a research project we did through VCCP Stoke. Really fascinating piece of research into young adults' perceptions of the advertising industry. And the work's not just influenced a lot of where we've got to today with Arrive and Thrive, but also prompted us at VCCP to change our application processes. And finally, our very own VCCP Chief People Officer, Nicola Longhurst, who has been with us for 12 years. She's been a really useful practical source of guidance, and I think we've also got some other Chief People Officers here, who've come along today because retention is everyone's problem, but it's also something that Nicola is personally passionate about as well. So we are really delighted to have her perspective as well. So anyway, that's the panel. I'll be chatting to them later. I promise you we'll finish at 7:30, but basically Jo's going to announce some initiatives, then we'll have the panel discussion, then we'll take some questions, and we will definitely finish at 7:30. Okay?
Yeah, sounds good.
All right.
Yeah, do you think I need the mic? I'm quite loud actually. Sandy, can you hear me? I can hear you fine. Do you need it for the camera?
Need it for the camera.
I'll quickly point at the camera. Yeah. Thank you, Michael. Is this on? Is that working? Yeah, great. Thanks, Michael, and thanks everyone for coming out. Because I know it's a very hot day, and those are a rare thing in the UK. I'm especially pleased that you're here, actually, because this all started with a conversation about strategists and or planners, whichever, doesn't matter, and talking about how we were facing, all of us, a collective challenge in not just bringing people in from more diverse backgrounds, but like creating an environment in which they can thrive. And I think that was probably the origin of this. There's lots of people in this room for whom I think this is a bit of a passion project. You know, people who think that they are somehow on the margins of what planning used to be about. Maybe they're from a, comprehensive school background, or they're from a group who's otherwise marginalised. And I think that the more we've talked as a team, the more we found out our individual stories have created this history of where we've had to kind of pretend that we're from somewhere where we weren't. Fun fact, when I used to work at 23 Red, Jane Asher, who's a very amazing woman, and I love her dearly, constantly thought that I went to Oxford. So, and I never told her that. And I definitely didn't go to Oxford. I mean, like the place once, maybe. But I was like, it's fine. If it means so much to her, I'm just going to let her think that. And I wouldn't do that anymore, because I'm just like, no, I want to own my truth, you know. Proudly went to a very substandard university and, you know, still managed to make my way, and that's fine. And I think lots of people need to surface those stories. But in doing that, I think we need to create a better environment for people who come from a less atypical strategy background. So 2 things. Why we need a new approach. We aren't great at recruiting from diverse backgrounds. I think that's a fact. You know, we try, and I think we've tried a bit harder more recently. I don't think we've been hugely successful. And those who do recruit are more likely to leave quickly. So there's a stat, and I know agencies are quite reluctant to give their data about churn. But anecdotally, and we sort of talked about this when we got together, people who come from a less typical background, and by that I just mean that maybe they went to a different kind of school, maybe they are a different ethnicity, maybe from a different country, maybe they just feel somehow that they are other, are more likely to leave within their first year. And there's not only a horrible human factor in that, there is also a massive business challenge, and I think both of those things combined mean that we need to act. So Michael's talked about this, why tackle it together? I always think that strategists are going to put with people who will solve everything just because we're a bit nicer. And I like the fact that, can you imagine if it was like, guys, there's loads of account service people are leaving, they'd be like, fuck it. But I think that together we can actually tackle the problem because we don't mind working together. And whilst when somebody's in your agency, you want to hold on to them and be really competitive about them going to somewhere else, when we're setting up that kind of macro environment, I think we can all work together on it. Also, if you create the best environment in your agency for candidates to arrive and thrive, then the only person who wins there is the candidate. So even if VCCP is a better place to work than Ogilvy, there's still going to be better and better places to work every single year. So hopefully we can create a bit of culture change. And it's going to be slow going, but it's going to be worth doing. So relevance of our output of our industry relies on the diversity of our workforce. Everyone broadly agree with that? Be interesting to know. I do. I think we are criticised for being irrelevant, and I think we need to face into that challenge. I think we've all sat in reviews where you're just like, have you ever been out of your front door? We have a collective challenge that to each new generation our industry becomes less appealing. So some of the research that you guys did shows that, and I think you can see it. You know, I don't know about everybody here, but I definitely year on year get less LinkedIn messages from grads. And that's a bad thing, you know, that's not a positive thing. It saves a bit of time, sure, but I just think, God, are we that unappealing? I think this is the best job in the world. And then we need to act today to sustain our craft for tomorrow. If we don't fix it, our agencies will die. And I think there's always a crisis headline, you know, crisis of creativity, crisis of effectiveness. I think there will be a crisis if we don't fix it. I don't think there is one now. I think it's an awesome place to work in advertising. But the way that we talk about it and present it to the outside world needs to change. So we've got 3 pillars that sit underneath this, and I have tried my best to tap into the sort of language I would have used as a sort of 16, 18-year-old. So we've tried to strip out anything which is T-plannery or strategy without making it really sort of dumb. And we've got to this. And please, if there's stuff in here, words in here that you don't agree with, then change it and innovate it. But I think the origin of it needs to sort of remain quite constant. So the 3 pillars are these: get in, so from first contact to the first few weeks; get good, building skills and adding value; and then get on, which is promotions, pay rises, and progress. And James, I thank you, because I think when we did the first version of this and sent it to you, you were like, you've not got this bit in here about how you get a pay rise. And I think it's really important because it's one of those awkward topics, and strategists, I think, are a bit more awkward than most people when it comes to advocating for your own pay. But that's super important to the audiences we want to appeal to. And also for the generation that are coming through right now, we need to be more transparent and upfront. So just to top line each of these really quickly. Get in. So the problem is this: recruitment is riddled with bias beyond the obvious. Working with our people team, we can change the experiences of candidates from the off. So a couple of actions that we've proposed are in this space. The interview before the interview. So if you've got a candidate who you want to interview, and this is not kind of getting into the diverse shortlist and working with partners that can provide a diverse list of recruits, I'm hoping that you're already on board with all of that stuff. This is extra. So the interview before the interview, offering a 20-minute phone call with somebody so that they know what to expect when they actually do the interview, even if that interview is with you. And I know that sounds quite weird, but just, no screen, just have a chat. I'm going to ask you about this. What do you want to ask about? What about this question? Oh, I don't really know that much about that. Okay, what about this one instead? Just kind of having a bit of an icebreaker and a prep before you get into it. The thing that I think this is quite similar to, and I don't know if anybody else has or had terrible nerves when they're pitching, but when I used to be super, super nervous about pitching, I used to always make an effort to have a bit of a chat with the clients in the room. I'd usually offer to make a coffee, not because I'm a girl, well, apart from at Mullen where actually didn't have a choice. I used to offer to make the coffee because then you can have a bit of a chat with somebody and then you've broken the ice, you've spoke to them and made a contact, and it's not so daunting. So it's a bit like that. Ask people questions, not advertising questions. And I think I've fallen foul to this over the years. Tell me about a brand you love, or what's a piece of advertising that's really stimulated you to buy something. And it's like these people are trying to pay their rent, working in Tesco's, trying to do a normal job. Maybe they've just not done A levels, or they're about to do A levels and they hate them. It's like, stop intellectualizing it. This isn't a job which requires you to be intellectual. It's a job which requires you to be a people person. So I think asking questions, and Michael had and I think you do that here. Are you prepared to share what you do here? The list?
Yeah.
Are you prepared to share?
Well, yeah, we just have a massive list of silly questions that we ask people to answer. Like, they're of the ilk of those questions like, what would win in a fight, a tiger or a bear? It's that sort of thing. Just give people the chance to just come up with an answer. It's not a test, and it's not an exam. So there's no right answer.
Yeah. I think it's true, and I think it's just it's much more. What was that?
How do you get from Jonagals to Scotland?
Amazing. Yeah, that's a great question. There is a very good strategist that you work with called Richard, who you all know who I mean, who in interviews always says, are you a film person or a book person? And then they'll choose one, and he'll ask them what they've read, and then he'll go, tell me what's it about? And they'll give the plot generally, and then they'll go, yeah, but what do you think it's about? Like, what's it actually? And like, it's just a way to tease out people's kind of ability to think in more conceptual terms without it being like a real dick move. So be clear about how your workplace works. So we've got people in, this is now their first few weeks. I think this is really important, and one of the things that I've really observed is that there's kind of rules around the workplace, and we kind of cover them up by being super cash about everything. When do you want this for? Oh, no bother. Like, sometimes tomorrow's absolutely great. Like, if you're new into the industry, or you're junior, or you are not socially confident, like giving an 8-hour window of something which feels to be quite important to your boss is not helpful. So I've started being, since we've had this chat, much more specific, and I'll be like, how does 10 o'clock tomorrow work for you? I'm expecting 2 slides. So just being really specific about things. And I think actually that could be helpful however long you've been in our industry. And maybe at some point we'll get clients to get on board with that idea as well. Create a glossary of your processes, places, and people. I think this idea that they'll pick it up is just really outdated. And it would be useful, I think, for everybody if they just knew what you were talking about. By the way, Rob Sanford, who's here, won our pub quiz by knowing in the final round. By being able to label all the rooms in our building, and there's quite a lot of rooms at Ogilvy, and the final round was put the names on the room plan, and he nailed it. So I think that's a useful thing to do, Rob.
People still come to me asking their room.
I know. That'll teach you. And then the final piece is here is to wrap a team around the new recruit. So there's people who work with your team, and you know, all teams are fluid. But I think just saying to them, this is the account person who's on your piece of business. This is the people person. This is the finance person. Just that they know 5 names, whether they're their manager, their mentor, or anybody else, so that they're looking out for them. We're all super busy, and I think just having more than one person who's keeping an eye on how they're getting on would be quite a useful thing. How the APG can help, inevitably, a sales opportunity here. There isn't, is there? It's free. This bit's free. It's a nice thing. Do you want to talk about this a little bit? So this is going to be live. So it's the APG strategy A to Z with Charlie Snow, which is, I think everybody knows Charlie, but it's going to be some sage wisdom which helps you navigate the agency world and the language we use. Sorry, Sarah, I know you've asked you this a million times.
7 videos which are going to appear online as a training course you can do in your own time. And each of the videos goes through all of the precepts you need to understand the planning strategy. And Charlie is sitting in a wheelchair in an amazing room where we did a film shoot in Greenwich, and he has little building blocks with all the letters, and it is the most mesmeric description of all the things you need to know about planning strategy. I'm kind of overselling it, but I'm not.
Oh,
Michael pointed out it's like Jack and Ori.
oh, it's good.
To make planning strategy accessible, we're hoping this will do it.
Yeah.
But it's in production at the moment, we've got a little bit to go, but that will be appearing next week.
So we'll send it, share it with your teams, but it's going to be a really lovely resource to have. Next one, get good. So the problem to tackle here is that over-reliance on people picking it up exacerbates the divide. Going back to that social confidence point, you know, if somebody feels like they're empowered to just go and ask questions and, you know, speak to the ECD and speak to the chief exec and find out this and find out that, then great for them. But lots of people don't feel like that. And I think that we have been really reliant on that kind of behaviour, helping people to educate themselves. Clarity is key. Guardrails about what is expected when makes all the difference. There's some elements of this which I think are quite challenging, and you know, there's pressure on our margins and agencies are busy, but I think what we've set this out to be is that if you can work towards doing some of these actions really soon, like next week, then that's a great step. And then let's work towards the ones which are a bit harder over the longer term. For me, I'm going to struggle with the 6 to 12 months of more learning than doing. So for new recruits, especially if they're new to job, spending 6 to 12 months where there is no pressure on them being billable, and I don't know what your billable levels are, that's quite hard, and we acknowledge that, and hopefully in more buoyant times that will be more believable, more achievable to do, but let's put it as a line in the sand. If there are rules, don't leave them unwritten. Does your CCO speak first in a creative review? I've seen loads of people fall foul of that, where suddenly everybody gives the new recruit daggers, and it's like, well, nobody told the new recruit not to pipe up with a point of view, so that's unfair. Make proper time for mentoring. 20% is ideal. I think, James, this came from you, and I think that's so true. You know, we often give that to people to put onto their day job, and they've already got a really full to-do list. Create an environment of constructive feedback. I don't know how you guys go about doing that. The guys at Facebook, or Meta, sorry, have a really brutal environment of, like, after every meeting they give feedback. Maybe that works for some people. I think often we just don't do it at all, or we save it for a review, or we just kind of mention it to somebody else at the pub, and then hope it gets back to them. That's annoying. And then finally, give guidelines on how long things take. 2 initiatives from the APG to help with this. So the first is Night School, which I will ask you to talk about because it is your brainchild, Michael.
Okay, I wasn't actually prepared to do that, but well, it's everyone's, I think. I mean, Night School is basically this idea that I think it started out by just doing an internal survey going, tell me that we were asking people who are now planners for, 2-3 years, tell me all the questions that you wanted to ask at the start that you were too afraid to ask because you thought you would look a bit stupid. And it was really terrifying because I was like, God, did no one tell you how to do that? What's a competitive review? How do I do one? Where do I start? How long is it meant to take? What's it good look like? And there was just a whole host of these, and we just thought, okay, well, let's just double check it's not just that we're really bad at VCCP at doing that. So we expand that survey to 2 or 3 other agencies and sort of similar things. So the purpose of Night School is really just a totally free. Is it totally free? Not a totally free. And nearly. It's such good value. It's such good value. It's like it's free. Yeah? Yeah. It's a bargain. It's all. Yeah. 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 I mean, God. I mean, that's effective. Yeah. That you might as well. That's almost free. Could you delete that bit from the phone? Yeah, so it's 6 to 7 modules where literally 7 modules. Trainers like Gemma will be talking through, and others who are through. Oh, hey. Yeah, okay. They will be explaining the absolute basics of the things that everyone should be told, but often don't get told because people around the departments are running around very busy and don't have the time. And it's just one of these things that we just thought, well, if we keep doing this on relative rotation, then no one really gets left behind because they're too concerned about asking the questions that someone should be answering, but we can do that for them. And, sorry, where is John Leach? There he is. John Leach, very kindly, John Leach is one of the most prestigious and eminent trainers of strategists and people in the advertising industry, many other things. And he has very kindly offered to train our mentors on how to train other people. So thank you very much, John, for doing that. Is that enough?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And then the next bit of this is mid-weight mentoring. So, you know, the reliance on our mid-weights to be good mentors without ever actually telling them what to do. And I think for lots of people, strategists and presumably real people, they find the idea of mentoring quite tricky. So this is an offer from the APG. 3rd of October is the first batch, isn't it? We've just agreed that today, 9 till 1. They can apply on the APG website, probably, yeah. So I think sign up to that, because I think loads of people, and I definitely am guilty of this, you know, will you mentor that person? And not only is it a time drain, but they might not know what to do. I get people all the time on LinkedIn saying, will you mentor me? And I'm like, I'd rather die than mentor a stranger. Like, I don't know, I've got nothing to offer. There's not, like, what's the question you want me to solve? But it's like, so hopefully that will solve all that. I might sign up for it, Sarah. So that's that, and then finally is get on. So the problem to tackle. Young people from less privileged backgrounds are less likely to advocate for their own pay and promotion, and it's a major reason for them moving on, because frankly they would rather apply for a different job at a different agency rather than go to their boss and say, I want a pay rise or need a pay rise. And I think that's something that we just need to be really cognizant of, not just for people from less affluent backgrounds, but for everybody. You know, money is paying bills and it's living the life you want to live. It's not just a sign of status. You know, it's easy to forget that. So actions to take now. I think create a cohort if you can. I know that not all of us in our agencies are in the position where we can go like, right, 5 or 6 new recruits this year, but maybe at some point in the future. But even if not, maybe create a cohort across the agency, so different disciplines, even if they are non-craft disciplines. I just think it really helps, and then they can talk to each other and, you know, test ideas out. Now and next job specs and objectives. Like, okay, it's my first day as a strategist, but how do I get to be a senior strategist? I think we've kind of got into a mindset where we think that's being pushy or overly ambitious or a bit annoying or demanding. It's not. I just want clarity about where I'm getting to next and what sort of time frame is realistic. Be transparent on pay and grades. I think this can be really challenging. I think we should try and move towards it. Lots of agencies do have grades. They might not publish them, but why not? And let's be transparent about when those lines in the sand are that you can ask for a pay rise and I'd like to get one. It's all way too ambiguous. And then invest in out-of-agency training and events with the APG. Because networks matter at every level, and I think you can kind of forget that you start building your network from day one, and that's really important. And we all benefit from knowing lots of people in this room, and you know, that matters if you're 22 or 18 and just starting out as well. How the APG can help, this is going to be coming soon, and maybe some of you guys will put your hands up for this. We had an idea about a strategy support club where we create kind of a phone-in or a Teams meeting probably, one night, a set night in the week, maybe it's a Tuesday, and it's Teams rather than in real life, so we can accommodate people with caring responsibilities, where we have 2 people who are a bit more experienced, and then they just host a call. So people can call in. You know, there's no daft question. It might be just, I'm not loving it at my agency. It's not a place to poach people, but it's just a place to give advice and go. This is why it's coming soon. There's a lot of work out in this one. But hopefully you can see how that might help. I think that's all we are going to talk about. Probably went on too long.
Right, Jo, can you stay there, please? Can we get Nicola, Steve, and James? I'm sitting on the soft ballot. Yeah, that should be... Right. I'm going to ask a few questions, then if anyone's got any questions, then feel free to shout. I don't know what's happened to our aircon. It seems to have gone off. I'm not. No, this is not a blame culture. It's just an observation. Anyway.
We'll be fine.
Unfortunately, there's 3 microphones and 4 people.
That's all right.
So, if you can share, that would be great.
I've done enough.
Is that all right? Right. First question. This is for everyone. From your perspective, what is the one most important issue or problem that you think we can start to fix that will help us to retain underrepresented groups? And I'm going to start on that side with Steve.
So I think it's a really interesting question. So I'll give you a little bit I'm going to talk personally because I think it's more interesting in some ways. So I'm disabled. I've got a lobster hand. I've got a missing fibula, a shortening of tibia, 2 toes on one, I think 4 on the other. So sometimes forget. I'm also neurodiverse. I'm dyslexic. I'm from an Irish traveller background. And when I was 18, I always kind of wanted to kind of work in kind of advertising. And I kind of went the back route. I went through research because I couldn't really kind of get in. And the interesting thing, I think, is, although I'm disabled from a working class background and neurodiverse, that doesn't define my whole identity. It's just part of the jigsaw of who I am. And I think, for me, it's about seeing, this sounds quite philosophical, but it's really about seeing the whole person. And we've got a tension between perfectionism on one side and authenticity on the other. And it's not really perfectionism, we just want mini-me's like us for our succession plan, yeah? That's why people do it, because it gives you confidence about kind of ego. And I think that's kind of changing. But I think it's about looking at the person, really kind of embracing them and seeing all their talents and allowing that kind of talent to come forward and really kind of thrive. Because it's bloody terrifying. So I remember my first job in advertising. It's lovely. It's Farm Communications and with Owen Lee and Alison Ashworth and Paul Jeffrey, and it's fantastic. But being disabled, I hate public transport, and it drains my energy and makes me exhausted. I went in there, and I used to try and hide my kind of dyslexia. I kind of joined. I was like, shit, I'm working class, man. I need to read kind of Tatler and enjoy rugby and cricket and fucking hate both all those things there. So suddenly I was changing who I was. And through what I call cognitive empathy, because I don't really believe in emotional empathy because I think it can be a little bit forced, but it's about understanding someone's position. The bosses were great. So they just sat me down and said, how can we make your life better and how can we help you? And they said, you're a bit quiet in meetings. And I was petrified because I worshipped kind of creatives. And I said, look, I struggle with the trains. They said, well, come in at 10 o'clock. They said, I struggle with dyslexia. Like, we didn't hire you to be a writer. We'll get someone to proofread for you, you know? And I'm masking a little bit. And they're like, well, we hired you because of who you are and your talent and because we want to understand different audiences. And just that understanding made a difference to me and my life.
I'd agree with all of that. I think that's right. So if you're talking about it from a people perspective, I'll talk about it from a company perspective. So I think the greatest challenge to make sure that underrepresented talent thrive in your agencies is how do we make it a necessity for our business rather than a nice to have. So how, when, as they are at the moment, times are hard, or even in a more mundane way where the pitch comes in and you haven't got time to do the mentoring that you should be doing, how do you make sure that it is essential enough to your agency that you keep doing it? So it's that, that Bill Bernbach thing of a principle isn't a principle until it's cost you money. So it's that. If it really is a principle, it's going to cost you money and you have to accept that. So that is more like an aspiration. But in terms of what you guys can do, I'm imagining lots of you are heads of departments or are CSOs. So my advice would be, as part of your annual assessment, make it one of the KPIs that you're judged on, that underrepresented talent has gone through your department and has risen through your department and has been trained. And even better, and this might be not so nice, is make that KPI allied to your salary or the bonus that you get, and then you will find it will happen.
Nice.
So just following on from that point, James, we were talking a little bit beforehand, and Nicola, this is quite good timing, because one of the biggest challenges is actually measuring and categorising underrepresented groups, because it's not something that you're actually able to do, you know. So is there a way around it that you can see, or?
It's tricky. I think, you know, we do surveys and we do ask people, you know, we try and collect the information in a kind of discreet way instead of going out and asking everyone. We have our system, we have our HR system, and say, you know, try and encourage people, check your address. There's lots of other boxes you can tick. If you feel comfortable, then, you know, please fill those in so we can get a really good view of the demographics of the business. And I think instead of it being mandated, it's kind of a gentle push to try and fill it in so we get a decent picture. But yeah, it is really hard, because also you don't want people asking inappropriate questions in interviews, because they're kind of trying to do the best they can, and, you know, and being insensitive, so it is difficult.
Can I just make one suggestion around that question? Sorry, is that I think the thing we've always found is that if those surveys become independent, people volunteer that information more readily. So if you can promise those people it won't go to the management, it will go to an independent source, they will own that data, they will report on that data, but the company will never get access to data. We found in the past that those kind of answers go exponentially.
Yeah, we have an external and we have an internal one as well. So yeah. So back to your question. I think for me, what I find, obviously, just being in VCCP over the years, is understanding that the whole kind of moving away from the mentality of sink or swim, and making sure that, you know, we understand that these groups of people, it's unrealistic for them to hit the ground running, and we have to make sure, you know, that's a really uncomfortable position to put people in. It's not going to succeed, and it's not inclusive at all. And I think it's really important that as a business, when we get these new joiners into the agency, we spend time in giving them space and giving them all the support we can give them. And I think creating like a kind of incubation period where they can have great managers who are looking after them, people who are really going to help, you know, explain what they need to do, explain the craft, be mentors, be there to ask silly questions they don't want to ask potentially somebody else, or what they think is silly, because obviously they're not silly questions. And I think we have to make sure that we create this environment. And I think if we do that, it starts as a great experience from the beginning. From when you join, you know, the agencies, you already feel like this is, you know, they're setting me up for success. The intention here is great. So I can see a good, you know, future. I can see that this is a place that I can grow. And I think from a retention point of view, the first experience has to be as best as it can be. And I think creating that space and that incubation environment will help people to thrive.
Jo, would you like to? There are other microphones, by the way.
Yeah, we just use this one. It's going to get sweatier as well over time. I think probably my answer is to be deeply suspicious of people who don't think this is important. Right. Because I think there is kind of a prevailing protectionist agenda in lots of agencies. And in some people voice it in the media as well. And especially actually now during a cost of living crisis, where people go, agencies talking about diversity, we should be talking about cost of living, as if diverse people aren't the victims of the cost of living crisis. And so I find that anybody who thinks that this agenda is not important, we should be very suspicious of. So I know it's not a very nice answer to it, and I don't want this to be, that Arrive and Thrive to be, let's create a warm bath. This is about let's create a better industry and better work and be more inclusive and more representative and create better careers for people in the process. This is not about creating a cosy bath where people don't have to be great. It's different to that. So I think, holding people to account when they go, well, I think we've got bigger fish to fry. It's like, no, there isn't bigger fish to fry. This is about people and futures, and it's about the work we make being super relevant. So I think that would be my answer.
Can I add to that?
Yeah.
Because I think that's a really interesting point. And I went to an MRS event, and someone made a really interesting point, and they said to the Market Research Society, they said, you're actually the minority. And I think we forget that 40% of the population is working class, 20% are disabled, 23% are neurodiverse. When you look at London, 67% are from ethnic minorities. We forget that. So to do the best work, we have to hire the talent that can connect.
You keep that mic over there. We're going to use it.
Okay. Next question, and actually this came from one of the many really good conversations that we had with James. It sort of made me feel a bit uneasy because I think, yes, we've all patted ourselves on the back because planners are the best people in the world. But I think one of the things James alluded to is that of all the departments in the industry, it is the most sort of proudly intellectual. And sometimes that can be, in itself, quite exclusionary. I mean, what do you think planning leaders can do? I'm going to ask Jo as a CSO. I mean, what do you think we can do specifically to help new planning talent survive and thrive? And how much of a problem do you think that intellectualism element is, or is this something that it's just a part of the culture, and
I think it is a problem, and so when James did spared some time for us, which was amazing. One of the things that was really awkward, and how many were on the call? There was about 6 of us maybe, and James was like, told us some quite harsh home truths during that call. I don't know if you realised it, but we were all kind of like, oh my God. But one of the things that we texted about afterwards was that every one of us had a massive bookshelf in the background, and somebody also had a piano, and it was like, guys, I think we might have fucked up.
That was not me, just to be clear.
But I think, and I messaged you about that conversation I had the other day about that very same thing. I think, and I've said this before, but I don't think you need to be intellectual to be. Are these not working? No. That one.
Michael's is.
Oh.
To check it to see.
I'll borrow yours.
Yeah, you can do. I don't think you need to be intellectual to be a good strategist. In fact, I think it probably helps if you're not. That's not to say we can't enjoy reading a book, and I don't think people should pretend that they don't enjoy a novel. I think quite often strategists are a bit nerdy, and that's fine, and we don't particularly love to overgeneralise, we don't love a massive party. That's all fine. We don't need to radically change who we are. But I think there's Sarah, you don't. But I think there's I think historically we've focused in on a very myopic view of what strategists are, and then I think anybody who's new to it tries to fit into that myopic view without really exploring the multifaceted personalities and lives and constructs that we all have. I mean, I think I don't know if anybody in this room, if somebody said, tell me a bit about yourself, the first thing they would say is, I'm an intellectual. I mean, maybe, but I don't. So I think it's, it's about just changing that. One of the things I'd love people to do actually, and maybe just have a think about this for the end, is just think about whether you have ever felt marginalised, othered, not quite good enough, a bit different to everybody else in any of your planning jobs. Just think about that, and maybe at the end we can do a bit of a show of hands, because I don't think it's necessarily an unfamiliar feeling. I think it's massively exacerbated in the people we exclude from our craft.
James?
So listen, I agree entirely. I mean, I'm sure lots of you read it. I read in Campaign a couple of months ago a column about how the industry needed more classicists within it, and after I'd removed my palm from my forehead, I kind of think that's a massive issue. So I think there's 2 things that we need to do. One is a massive thing. One is a dead simple thing. The massive thing is, and you started to do it in this Arrive and Thrive document, where people go on and see that, is to redefine what planning is and what planners are. And I think what you've done on there is kind of write out a really nice mission statement of what that could be. And then I think what you guys need to do is to sort of take that away and go, okay, what does that mean? What are the specifics of what we do and what we don't do, how we behave and how we don't behave? You know, a classic planning is and isn't, that kind of thing. So I think you need to take that away. And I think that I would kind of call on you to forget the intellectualism and remember three planning principles, like basic planning principles will help you. So I think one is our job is meant to be creating the simple. It is not meant to be creating the complex. You're not auditioning for the next series of Only Connect. So that's fine. So you don't need to be an intellectual to do that. The second thing is that we build brands, but what we're trying to do is we're trying to build emotional brands. We're not trying to build cerebral brands, are we? So we don't need to be overly cerebral about that. And then the third thing, which I just think is a thing that is helpful to get you there, is the best planners are great listeners, right? And are collaborators and are looking to, like I said, because to be honest, if you look at the APG thing and then go, right, we've got it, off we go, you're going to fail, because it's a great, like you say, it's a starter's pistol, but you've got to work out a lot of stuff, so that listening, I think, will help you. And then in terms of just a dead simple practical thing, I already talked about how you should have KPIs against your name about underrepresented talent and their progression. I think in the early days, if you already have, or if you get underrepresented talent into your departments, you should personally mentor them. That is when Commercial Break existed as a company to bring talent into the industry rather than annoy the industry, the people we had best success within the industry were where the most senior person went, I'm your man or woman, I will look after you, I will make sure you get on, and it's no surprise that they do get on, so make it your personal project.
Yeah. I've got a whole load of other questions, but I just thought I'd ask if anyone wanted to start and shout and ask anything in particular. Josh?
I've got a question. Steve, you were talking about cognitive empathy, which I talked about listening well, but cognitive empathy or emotional empathy sounded counterintuitive to me, but very interesting.
So yeah, it's really interesting. So I talk a lot about time. I've got kind of polemic coming out against it. So, but I think sometimes we feel that we can put ourselves in other people's shoes, and we can't. What we can do is have a better understanding of who those people are. So even though I'm disabled, I can't put myself in the shoes of someone with hearing loss. Yeah, I can't put my shoes in someone with visual, and I think we misconnect these two terminologies, and sometimes you see it in research. I'm going to put myself into that person's world. Yeah, I'm really going to understand how they feel. You can't. You had a 1 hour conversation. You can't live that person's life. So what you can do is have a better understanding and a presence for that person.
It's that Andrew Spencer thing, isn't it? The empathy delusion.
Yeah, yeah.
We always think we're empathy machines and we're not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a question about agency culture. So we talked a lot about things that we can do to help people feel welcome. I think there are things within agency cultures that are inherently exclusionary, like, for example, people talking about where they go on holidays, or there's always in the pub after work, and if you come from a background where you don't drink, like that is exclusionary. So like, what can agencies do to kind of make those more implicit pieces within culture more welcoming?
I mean, listen, that's such a good point and a good question. And slightly, just before answering, I'd really recommend, if people haven't read it, there's a book called The Class Ceiling by this academic called Sam Freeman, and he basically went around and he talked to a TV company and lawyers and actors and tried to work. And his biggest single thing is culture is the worst thing, because in creative industries, I mean, even like, listen, tonight it's such a lovely atmosphere, and I feel like such a dick saying this, but like that kind of smart but larky atmosphere that exists in here, I know from the guys that we've worked with, they would find that so frightening. It would be untrue. So the things that we do and the informality that we have. So Freeman's point is that makes it impossible to navigate, because there's a hidden series of rules that you were talking about. So I think, okay, so I think that one is uh, being aware of that. So like just being aware of those things in the first place is a great step. One of the things we always say is, you know, when you leave tonight, tomorrow, just when you have your planning meetings or your meetings with your teams or whatever it is, just raise your antennae and just start observing what people talk about and what people do. So I think just kind of logging that stuff is like a really important first step in that. And then I think, you know, it's a sort of buzzword or phrase that maybe feels like a hoary old cliche, but it's useful, which is reverse mentoring. So when you get the underrepresented talent in your agency, find out what they want, find out what is awful, get them to talk to the leaders and help the leaders, because that's sort of how change will happen. But I mean, I think, to be honest, there are so many articles and advice like that. I'd really recommend the Social Mobility Commission, which is a government thing, but they have a toolkit on there for creative industries on how you can create social mobility, which kind of addresses stuff like that. But yeah, my thing would be just you've already recognised it. That's really good. Make sure you're aware of it. But there's a host of things like so Sam Friedman's thing. He talks about, so this is hard to believe, but it's true, but like Channel 4 commissioning, he said one of the hardest things was they'd have a commissioning meeting every Monday and everybody would be, you know, quoting Homer and, you know, alluding to Shakespeare and stuff like that. And he was just like, oh my God, you just don't say anything. It's like, you know, that's extreme, but you can kind of think, like you say, the things you talk about. But I think a lot of this is just about openness and conversations and the willingness to be humble and fail and ask people for help, because people don't mind if you screw up, but they do mind if you screw up again. So as long as you screw up, apologise and say, what should I have done differently? You can. But listen, there's so many systemic things you can do, but we talk for 3 hours.
So this isn't specific to the ad industry, but I worked on Lighten Your Load, the Maltesers, looking at women in the workplace. And what was really interesting across that was that women, and I think most people, still don't feel allowed to feel vulnerable at work. So we talk a lot about authenticity, but it's often seen as a sign of weakness. And then you come to flexible working, and a lot of people are like, well, my boss has given me flexible working, that's great, I won't now ask for a pay rise. Yeah? And also, I've now lost the proximity because we got young males who are close to the boss, and I'm not, and they're going to the pub. So there's still some really big fundamental issues that need to be addressed. I think the other thing is, when you've got new people in industry, just have an interest in who they are and drop your ego, because we learn from everyone. Every conversation should be a learning experience, and we can learn so much, but we've got to say we're not the oracle of all knowledge, and we can learn, because that's how you're going to get better work.
Anyone else? Yes.
It would be great to know if you have any recommendations or learnings around the best ways to recruit candidates, whether it's the channel you go through, the program you sign up to, or even just before that interview process even happens.
I'm really happy to share with you what we've done to change our recruitment processes, because of a lot of the work that we did with Steve, we realised there's so much you can change that, you know, doesn't cost the world, doesn't force you to have to rewrite everything. Some of those examples are in there, but we've got a lot more. It's never something that we've wanted to hold. And the more we can change those recruitment processes, the better.
And I think we should probably put a list up on the APG website of some of the partners that people can work with at some point. I know it's like, let's not rush into it, so we get a proper list, but there's and lots of people, partners will know that there's recruiters and consultants who specialise in bringing diverse shortlists. I think there's some really simple things like we've just got to stop hiring like somebody's mate of a mate. And it's not saying that the mate of the mate shouldn't get an interview, and I always think it's not just like okay, they can't have an interview because they're unfortunate enough to know you. It's like they can have an interview when we put together a complete list. And I think it's just being a bit cognizant of that. And then there is some advice in the longer hand of this, isn't there, around recruitment?
Yeah, we have a set of principles that we put together, and we actually invite the recruiters in for like a round table and talk to them about our principles and ask them what are they doing to help us meet our principles. And I think that's really helpful. We did it first it was like probably 4 or 5 years ago, and it was quite surprising how little they were doing, and I think now it's definitely much more on their agenda. and kind of pushing back and making sure like we're hitting these gender balanced and you know, and a diverse shortlist does really help. And actually now they know that that's what we do, so we do get more candidates.
Emily.
Yeah, I was interested in the client perspective as like the unspoken party in the whole thing, because I get that this is about our industry and I love all of it and we've talked about it loads, but I think the intellectualism point is really interesting when you think about the client angle on this, because so often it's the client perpetuating that need for the planner or strategist to be the intellectual or the voice of the, you know, the intellectual voice in the room. Some clients I think are brilliant agents for change, we work with some way, and some, but I think I'm interested, particularly from you, James, if you've got any experience of how we might help that party help us get better as an industry.
Yeah, I think clients are really important, and I think they're a really positive force in that, with the caveat that I'll come on to. But so I think first of all, from all our experience, it would suggest that the more you involve the client in the process that you're going through, the more likely it is to succeed. So, you know, just like clients like to be involved in everything and know everything that's going on, to say, we are doing this thing, you might start seeing people in this meeting. In fact, we're going to do a training session with you about how you should act with these people as soon as they get involved. And I've never come across a client who's gone, oh God, that sounds like a pain in the arse. They all love it. Do you know what I mean? And they want to be involved in it. And they love what I imagine we all love, which is, you know, bringing young people on and giving them opportunities and seeing them grow and all those sorts of things. So I think clients just will want to get involved anyway. And if you reframe it with them and make them part of that reframing, then it takes away that kind of intellectual problem. I think the second thing is, just in a kind of, you know, brass tacks way, if clients tell agencies to do stuff, okay, agencies go, oh, we don't want to do it, but they do it. Do you know what I mean? So you know, I think getting clients on board as a force for change is really good. And, you know, and they're starting to do it with pitch lists and stuff like that you have to have. And then my caveat on that point is that that's happened in Holland for a long time, that clients have put on their pitches, okay, you know, you need this type of diversity. And what they found in Holland is that the agencies end up doing less of the E&I of DE&I. It just becomes a number head count. So I think you have to use that kind of information responsibly. But yeah, just involve clients. I know it sounds simple, but it will make a huge difference.
I also think I think that's so true. And the whole talk to us about your diversity percentages in a RFP or whatever it is. Diverse people aren't a separate department. It's like if we put them on, if we put the percentages in the RFI, then they are the people who will also work on business. And I think that there's a bit of an education job, isn't there? So it's like, you know, you definitely want people from diverse backgrounds. Here they are in our agency doing the actual jobs that agencies get paid for doing. So it's not a fucking surprise that they're showing up. But I think there's also a bit of an agencies are a bit like trapped in this abusive relationship with clients, you know, and we talked a little bit about this as well, didn't we? About how it's like, well, the client wants a strategist to be the smartest person in the room. You know, they want them to stand up and say sort of smart, intelligent things. And it's not so long ago when the client wanted that person to be a man, and then wanted that person to be a middle-aged white man specifically. And that's starting to change a little bit, not totally, but that's starting to change, and I think we can change it further. I think we've kind of, we have stopped trying to challenge the stereotypes which exist in that liminal space between agencies and clients. And I think if you had a very candid conversation with most clients who are decent people, they would get that that the way that smart shows up isn't the way that it always used to show up in that really predictable way.
Can I just ask, you know, for those people who are not born in the UK and have come to work in a UK agency, is this obsession with planners being the intellectual ones, is that a British class thing, or no, is that something that you see? Okay.
It exists in New York as well. In America.
It's like that in Australia on steroids.
Right.
Usually they want British planners to come over.
My equivalent CSO in Australia, Ryan Rabinowitz, who's amazing, he was over the other week and he said that to me. He went, I'm like a novelty in Australia because I'm an Australian man in planning and I've been riding that train for my whole career.
We've run out of time.
Yeah.
so much to everyone. This has been a brilliant discussion, very frank, very sharing, very collaborative, as this has been from the start. Massive thank you particularly to Steve and James for all your help that you've given us. Some brilliant advice. I hope someone's taking notes, because there were some wonderful extra bits of advice that you've given us this evening that I think we can all take on board. Massive thanks to Nicola, who's been involved in this from the start, and is, you know, we're trying to change things slowly, and I think Jo as well has done a brilliant job actually turning this into something wonderfully clear, wonderfully practical and actionable as well, because these things aren't easy, and I think that's the thing. This is just the start of a pistol. We know that it's not easy to implement a lot of these changes. Time is money, and right now we're not in the greatest shape as an industry or as an economy, so not everything can be implemented instantly, but I think there's enough actionable things that are just hopefully fairly easy to do, and you know, from our own experience of changing things at VCCP, they are having an impact. They do make a difference. So I hope that's the best takeout that you get from this evening. But yeah, thanks very much.
Thank you.